Greetings, everybody. Rob Chassner here, continuing our study in the book of Isaiah. So if you're following along, we're picking up in Isaiah chapter 50. And one of the signs of immaturity, particularly with children, is when you see after they are disciplined by their parents, they respond by saying, "You don't love me," or "You're mean," or "You're not nice," or something in that like that. In the same fashion, the nation of Israel was very immature spiritually during this period of time in history. God was ready to lower the boom and enforce punishment upon the nation of Israel. And God told these people, this is the standard of living. This is how you are to live your lives. Don't do these things that you are doing, or I will bring upon you judgment. And of course, we have seen that the judgment which was being referred to here is going to be their captivity in Babylonia for 70 years. And the Lord sees that when Israel's in the midst of their disciplinarian time, that 70 years, that they will be prone to say to God, "You don't love me," or "You're mean," or "You're not nice." And that's human nature. We begin to analyze during times of judgment that God is sovereign and in control of all things in the world. We begin to think God could have kept this judgment from happening. He could have prevented all of this. And we come up with the conclusion that God must not like me, or that he must have forgotten me. And so with the Lord being eternal, being at the beginning and already at the end of eternity, he can see this indictment coming his way. And so what he's doing is he is inspiring the prophet Isaiah to head off this indictment. Um, Long before the Babylonians first invaded Israel back in 606 BC. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar invaded Israel several times during his reign, and as the king of Babylonia. And the Lord is going to be challenging Israel by saying, "Don't you point your finger at me. Don't suggest that this judgment is my fault. Don't suggest that I do not care about you." And so here we start in chapter 50. God is discussing the attitude of Israel. Verses 1, 2, and 3. This is what the Lord says. "Where is your mother's certificate of divorce with which I sent her away? Or to which of my creditors did I sell you? Because of your sins you were sold. Because of your transgressions your mother was sent away. When I came, why was there no one? When I called, why was there no one to answer? Was my arm too short to deliver you? Do I lack the strength to rescue you? By a mere rebuke I dry up the sea. I turn rivers into a desert. Their fish rot for lack of water and die of thirst. I clothe the heavens and with darkness, and make sackcloth its coverings." Now, it's easy for us to see how we as humans can think that God has divorced us or forgotten about us. And he says here, "I have not sold you." Notice he says that you have sold yourselves. The reality is that we do something stupid, we get consequences, and then somehow blame God for what happened, and we get mad at God. We do see examples like this where a guy is unfaithful to his wife. Obviously, she is bitter. The children become resentful. Then all of a sudden, the guy begins to go to church, and as time passes, he doesn't see his family get back together, and so he comes to this bitter attitude towards God that his family is still apart, and he begins to say, "How can I believe in a God that doesn't help me? How can I have faith in a God that won't bring my family back together? So as human beings, we make our own stew. We begin to boil in that stew, and then somehow we blame God that it is too hot in this stew, and we begin to blame God for the problem. Now, notice God is saying, the problem is not me, that meaning God. Notice God says, I don't have too short of hands. Uh, it is not that I'm unable. Notice God is saying, I cried out to you, but when I was crying out to you, where were you? What were you doing? Who was responding? So notice God says, you are the problem. I'm not the problem here. You sold me meaning God. You left me, and I do not leave you, and yet you're blaming me as being the problem. God says, no, I don't think so. Now let's take a look at verses 4 through 9. The sovereign Lord has given me a well-instructed tongue to know the word that sustains the weary. He wakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen like one being instructed. The sovereign Lord has opened my ears. I have not been rebellious. I have not turned away. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheek to those who have pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore have I set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame. He who vindicates me is near. Who then will bring charges against me? Let us face each other. Who is my accuser? Let him confront me. It is the sovereign Lord who helps me. Who will condemn me? They will all wear out like a garment. The moths will eat them up. All right. Obviously, Isaiah turns quickly here to speak of the Messiah. And notice several things when he tells us about the Messiah. What are some references in these scriptures? He turned his back to those who struck him, the scourging, beard being pulled out, the humiliation of being spit upon. These are all what happened during the time just leading up to and including the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Notice the Messiah says, I have opened my ear. Now, that is a reference to, well, I am open to listening to the Father, or I am willing to learn, that sort of thing. What does that mean? Well, this was a cultural issue talking about a person voluntarily becoming a slave. If someone found themselves in a financial bind and there's no bailouts like we have today, you sell yourself to the creditor for 6 years to pay off the debt. And sometimes living as a slave became better than before. So you voluntarily stay on after the 6 years instead of recapturing your freedom and going back to your dirt floor in your hut. You stay living in a nice place and you allow this party who was a former creditor to be your master on a voluntary basis of your own free will. And that is what the Messiah is saying here. I signed up for this. Remember what Jesus said to Peter, put your sword away. If I wanted, I could call legions of angels to protect me, but I signed up for this, and so I'm going to move ahead. We distinguish that there are two kinds of courage. One is spur of the moment courage. This would be where you're witnessing an auto accident, a car flips over right in front of you. There's a mom and a few kids trapped in the car. The car bursts into flames, and you, in that moment, run to the car, smash the windows, pull the mom and the 3 kids out of the car to safety, and you save this family. That's spur of the moment type of courage. You had a rush of adrenaline, and you look back on that moment, you begin to break out in a sweat when you realize what you had done and how dangerous it was that you overcame in that particular moment. That's one form of courage. Another form of courage is when you see trouble coming in advance. It's miles ahead of you, and you're marching that way, and yet you don't retreat. The Messiah saw trouble, not only from miles away, but from eternity past. before the foundation of the world was laid, it was determined that Jesus Christ um, would give up his life for death for all of us who are ungodly. And so these scriptures speak of Jesus Christ courageously taking this on. And also notice that we have information about the devotional life of Jesus. Notice it says, morning by morning, he wakes me, he teaches me. We see this throughout the Gospels, how Jesus would oftentimes go off into an isolated area, and there he would pray and seek his Father in heaven. Notice in his devotion, it wasn't only learning what to say, but more importantly, notice it says he would teach him how to say it. There are some people who know what to say. They speak the truth, yet the things that they say are offensive. It's an offensive way, and you almost can't even stand being in the same room with a person like this. And so it's not only important for you to pray and tell God, so God can tell you what to say, but it's also important for you to let God show you how to convey that message with the grace and the mercy of God in your delivering of those words. All right, let's look at verses 10 and 11. Who among you fears the Lord and obeys the word of the servant? Let the one who walks in the dark have no light. Who has no light, trust in the name of the Lord and rely on their God. But now all you who light fires and provide yourself with flaming torches, go walk in the light of your fires and of the torch you have set ablaze. This is what you shall receive from my hand. You will lie down in torment. We are all going to have trials in our lives. We are all going to have seasons of darkness in our lives. Notice he says, if you are to fear God and obey his servant Jesus, notice it says two things. Trust in the name of the Lord. What is the name of the Lord? It's Jesus. And he will save his people from their sins. The Lord's name in Greek is Jesus. In Hebrew, it's Yeshua. That means my salvation, or the one who saves. And so trust that Jesus can and will save you. The second is rely upon God. When you find yourself in a problem or darkness, you rely on yourself to figure things out, or you can rely upon God to figure things out. Notice in verse 11, it says you are going to rely upon yourself rather than the Lord. It says, from my hand you are going to know sorrow. So do not be self-reliant. Trust in the Lord. You might also want to look at Philippians 4:19, where it says that God provides for all of your needs according to his riches and glory. And that is saying that you give up your self-reliance and you rely solely on God. So this would be this verse 11 in chapter 50 would be a good matching verse to Philippians 4:19. All right, we're in chapter 51 now, verses 1 through 8, which say, listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and who seek the Lord. Look on to the rock from which you were cut and to the quarry from which you were hewn. Look at Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who gave you birth. When I called him, he was only one man, and I blessed him and made him many. The Lord will surely comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all her ruins. He will make her deserts like Eden, her wastelands like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the sound of singing. Listen to me, my people, hear me, my nation. Instruction will go out from me. My justice will become a light of the nations. My righteousness draws near speedily. My salvation is on the way, and my arm will bring justice to the nations. The islands will look to me and wait in hope for my arm. Lift up your eyes to the heavens. Look on the earth beneath. The heavens will vanish like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants die like flies. But my salvation will last forever. My righteousness will never fail. Hear me, you who know what is right, that you people who have taken my instruction to heart, do not fear the reproach of mere mortals or be terrified by their insults. For the moth will eat them up like a garment, the worm will devour them like wool, but my righteousness will last forever, my salvation through all generations. Now notice in verse 1, verse 4, verse 7, God says, listen to me. It reminds me of Deuteronomy 6:4, where it says Shema means to hear or to listen. Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. If God tells you something 3 times in a period of about 30 seconds of reading scripture, like as what's taken place in these verses, it's likely you should pay attention. We know that there's repetition in Hebrew and in Greek as a way of emphasizing or accentuating a point. There's no superlatives in Hebrew or Greek. So what God is saying here is to listen to him. In life, there are going to be insults. In life, there's going to be people contrary to you. There are going to be people who undermine your faith. There are going to be people who disrupt your happiness, your peace. But notice that God is saying, my salvation is forever. That's Jesus' personal Hebrew name, my salvation, Yeshua. He says, my righteousness is forever. Mockery is temporary. The person who has given you such a hard time, who is disrupting your life, who is insulting you, and who's insulting your faith, God tells us in those verses, that is temporary. But God's love for you, his salvation, his righteousness, which he imputed upon you, that is eternal. All right, let's take a look now at verses 9 through 16. Awake, awake, arm of the Lord, clothe yourself with strength. Awake, as in days gone by, as in generations of old. What is not you who cut Rahab to pieces? Was it not you? Who pierced that monster through? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made a road in the depths of the sea, so that the redeemed might cross over? Obviously, that's a reference to in Exodus crossing the Red Sea. Those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. I, even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you fear mere mortals, human beings who are but grass, that you forget the Lord your Maker, who stretches out the heavens and who lays the foundation of the earth, that you live in constant terror every day because of the wrath of the oppressor, who is bent on destruction, for where is the wrath of the oppressor? The cowering prisoners will soon be set free. They will not die in their dungeon, nor will they lack bread, for I am the Lord your God, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord Almighty, in his name, I have put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. I who set the heavens in place, who laid the foundations of the earth, and who say to Zion, you are my people. Now notice it says that Israel forgot God, and what was the result? They were afraid every single day. There is a connection between forgetting God and being fearful. If you forget God, you're going to be afraid of everything. You're going to be worrying about everything. And in fact, if you're having that problem, read Matthew 6 carefully. Read it over and over again. God reminds us that you are a child of God. Notice it says, who are you? And why are you afraid of man who dies? If you are a friend or a child of God who lives forever, who can do anything and who can do everything, and if that is who you are, then why are you so filled with fear and anxiety? Israel forgot who God is, and as a result, they were afraid every single day. Now notice it says, where is the fury of your oppressor? Have you ever stopped to think that the fury of the oppressor is under the control of God also? It doesn't matter what you're dealing with, who is attacking you. It doesn't matter who is raining on your parade or who is rebuking your faith. All of those oppressors are under the control of God. Look at the eternal perspective and drop your fear. All right, let's look at verses 17 to 23. Awake, awake, rise up, Jerusalem, you who have drunk from the hand of the Lord the cup of his wrath, you who have drained to its dregs the goblet that makes people stagger. Among all the children she bore, there was none to guide her. Among all the children she reared, there was none to take her by the hand. These double calamities have come upon you. Who can comfort you? Ruin and destruction, famine and sword. Who can console you? Your children have fainted. They lie at every street corner like antelope caught in a net. They are filled with the wrath of the Lord, with the rebuke of your God. Therefore, hear this. You afflicted one, made drunk, but not with wine. This is what your sovereign Lord says, your God who defends his people. See, I have taken out of your hand the cup that has made you stagger, from the cup, the goblet of my wrath. You will never drink again. I will put it into the hands of your tormentors, and who said to you, fall prostrate, that we may walk on you. And you made your back like the ground, like a street to be walked upon. Now, this was a cultural thing. The defeated would lay down as a sign of surrender, and the conqueror would then walk over them or walk on them as a sign of dominance and power. Now, God's judgment sometimes in Scripture is spoken as a cup. You remember in Matthew chapter 26 and Luke chapter 22 that when Jesus, the night before he was going to the cross, when he was praying, he said, as he's praying to the Father in heaven, he says, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless not my will, but your will. The cup was not it was symbolic for judgment, the judgment of the cross. God's fury, which would be poured out upon him on the cross. Now he is promising his people, are you not going to drink this cup anymore? I am going to give you that cup or pass that cup to another. That's what that is representing. All right, we're in chapter 52, verses 1, 2, and 3. It says, awake, awake, Zion, clothe yourself with strength, put on your garments of splendor. Jerusalem, the holy city, the uncircumcised and defiled will not enter you again. Shake off your dust, rise up, sit enthroned, Jerusalem. Free yourself from the chains of your neck, daughter Zion, now a captive, for this is what the Lord says, you were sold for nothing, and without money you will be redeemed. It's interesting here. You have sold yourself for nothing. Look at the things we have given ourselves to the end to that end, destroying our lives. Think about the things we have given ourselves or we have sold ourselves to that have brought ruin to our lives. And for what? What do we get out of it? There are many examples, but you have this former governor out of South Carolina, a promising candidate for the White House, 4 sons and a wife. He gets caught in Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta, coming back from Buenos Aires back in the summer of 2009, and he was with a woman, but it wasn't his wife, and he was taking a holiday with her, and what did it get him? It ruined his career. God is telling these people, you have sold yourselves for nothing. I'm offering you a way back to be redeemed. I'm offering you a way back for your lives to have purpose and meaning. Notice he says you are going to be redeemed. You're going to be ransomed without money. This should remind us of what Peter said in 1 Peter 1, verse, I can't see I think it's verse hang on, it's a little bit too small a print for me. Verse 18 and verse 19, it says, for you know that it is nothing, sorry, let me start over. 1 Peter 1, verse 18, for you know that it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Okay, and so this is now what God is going to be taking us into. Let's take a look now. We'll continue. We're in Isaiah chapter 52. Let's look at verses 4 to 10. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. At first, my people were down to Egypt to live. Lately, Assyria has oppressed them. And now, what do I have here, declares the Lord? For my people have been taken away for nothing, and those who rule them mock, declares the Lord. And all day my name is constantly blasphemed. Therefore, my people will know my name. Therefore, in that day they will know that it is I who foretold it. Yes, it is I. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet to those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, you watchmen, your watchmen lift up their voices. Together they shout for joy. When the Lord returns to Zion, they will see it with their own eyes. Burst into song and joy together, you ruins of Jerusalem, for the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord will lay bare his holy arm in the sight of all nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. All right, so what does it mean when he says in verse 10 to bear his holy arm? This was a cultural expression similar to the expression today of rolling up your sleeves. What does that mean? It means you're going to get aggressive, you're going to do it yourself, you're going to be active yourself in a project. And this is what God is saying that he is about to initiate action, and he is going to get very aggressive with delivering his people from Babylonian captivity. So these next verses go, is God directing his people who are in the Babylonian captivity. Let's look at verses 11 and 12. Depart, go out from there, touch no unclean thing, come out from it and be pure, you who carry the articles of the Lord's house, but you will not leave in haste or go in flight, for the Lord will go before you, the God of Israel will be your rear guard. All right, so when it is time to leave Babylon, and don't forget that this is a prophecy. At this time, the Babylonians have not even taken them. This is long before they've been taken. This is a prophecy written that not only were they going to be in captivity by Babylon, but they were going to also be let out by the arm of the Lord. So we see God rolling up his sleeves. God is initiating a plan by which they can leave Babylon and go back to Jerusalem. Notice that God is having to pry them up and to leave. They will have been in Babylon for 70 years. Many of them will have been born and lived their entire lives in Babylon. Many of them would have built homes, had businesses, vineyards, farms. And if you read history books, there was a plot to kill all the Jews during the time in Babylon so they could steal the wealth that they had built through good blessings from God to the Jews, even while they were in captivity. And so God is having to push them out of the nest, so to speak, to go back to Jerusalem, away from their successful businesses and the homes that they've made in Babylon, which would have been a ruinous city. That would be Jerusalem. God's eternal plan was not for them to stay in Babylon, but part of his eternal plan was to bless them even during the times of captivity and then take them back into the promised land. Um, they had grown so comfortable while in captivity that they needed to be pried away from their lives, their businesses, their farms, and so forth. Um, a very small percentage of the Jews went back because they did not want to leave their interests in Babylon, that which they had built. And there is a great lesson for us today in these verses. If you are a child of God, am I becoming so comfortable and so settled down here in my surroundings that when God calls or speaks out, would there be resistance on my part to follow God's request? Even though it might be a part of God's eternal plan, we can miss the blessings because we're so comfortable and settled in our own little world. Remember, God's will shall be done with or without your cooperation. So if he taps you on the shoulder and you say, no, I'm busy enjoying my stuff, God's going to still get the job done with some ministry he's asking you to do, but he's going to bless somebody else who's willing to be a servant and say yes. So notice it says when you leave, you will not be running at night. It says you will not be leaving in haste, or you'll not be leaving in flight. Remember, if you studied Nehemiah and Ezra, God said that he moved through the heart of the Persian king who gave the Jews permission to repatriate. Notice it says that God is going to go before you. We certainly see that in Nehemiah. And notice it says that the God of Israel will be your rear guard. Well, what does that mean? Now, you might recall that Ezra had been bragging to the Persians saying, our God can do this and our God can do that. In fact, there's nothing that our God cannot do. And so when it came time for Ezra to take the journey back to Jerusalem through a very hostile territory, you remember Cyrus, the king of Persia, the Medo-Persians, gave them all kinds of resources, money, materials, and so forth. And now they're going to be going through a hostile territory. Ezra was saying a few soldiers would look good right about now, but then he thought to himself, well, how can I go to the Persians and request a military escort when I have just spent several years, telling them how awesome my God is? And when you read Ezra, he says, and so we were just setting out on this journey by faith. He headed out of Persia, and no doubt he was trusting in this verse number 12 that God was going to be having their collective backs. Now, as we get to this final section, this is one of the most uncomfortable chapter breaks in the Bible. It's obvious that verses 13 through 15 belong with the 12 verses in Isaiah chapter 53, which we'll study in the next video, which is all about the suffering servant. So let's take a look at these last verses. Verse 13, see, my servant will act wisely. He will be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. So this is a passage that the Ethiopian was reading out loud with his entourage as he was leaving Jerusalem and heading back to Ethiopia. And he came across this lonely road, crossed paths with Philip, who was actually sent to evangelize to him. This is in Acts chapter 8. You remember that the eunuch was reading the last part of Isaiah 52 and 53, all of 53, the 12 verses, out loud. And Philip walks up to him and says, do you know what you are reading? And he said, no, not really. And then Philip jumped in to the chariot, and the Ethiopian asked, is he talking about himself or about someone else? Well, once you go to a person who asks you questions about something having to do with God or God's kingdom, they're giving you permission to evangelize to them. It's called permission evangelism. And so if you read Acts chapter 8, towards the end, you will see Philip is preaching Christ to the Ethiopian. So obviously, this is about Jesus. What does it say? Firstly, Christ will deal prudently, wisely. Um, and notice it says, secondly, he will be highly exalted. No doubt there will be a great suffering, and he will be lifted up and highly exalted. When will that be? Well, the Bible tells us every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. So this is face to face. This is which is a term for Yom Kippur, one of the fall festivals. That's going to be Judgment Day. And then verse 14, just as there are many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. Now, this word appalled or astonished, it's the idea of silence. It has the idea of seeing something that's so shocking that you would gasp. It is something that you see and you naturally put your hands over your eyes or your hands over your mouth and eyes, and you are so taken back that you're so set off balance by what you're seeing that you don't have words to speak at that particular moment. When John, the Revelator, sees Jesus, he sees him as a lamb that has been slaughtered. The Romans were vicious people. And even yet, when Pilate said to the people to back off after he saw Jesus scourged, notice it says that his form was disfigured. I don't think we need to review what a crucifixion does to the human body, but it disfigures it quite extensively. All right, and so now the reason why Jesus was to be disfigured and scourged and marred and beaten, verse 15. So he will sprinkle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand. All right, so in that system of religion, who did the sprinkling? Well, the priests did the sprinkling. The imagery that Isaiah is giving us is that Christ is the priest. In the verses next that we'll see in Isaiah chapter 53, Isaiah is speaking about Christ being the offering, the sacrifice, the perfect sacrificial lamb. And notice Christ is not doing this for Israel only. What does it say? It says many nations. Jesus is not just the Messiah of the Jews. Jesus is the Messiah for all nations, or it says many nations. Notice the advantage that we have over the Old Testament believers, we being, the church community, the Gentile community has an advantage. They were looking into the future, the Jews were, on what was going to happen, and now modern day we have these events to go back on and see what history records in Isaiah chapters 52 and 53, and it makes perfect sense. We can see, this big epiphany, this big aha, that is what happened. If we lived before the crucifixion, we would look at Isaiah 52 and 53 and likely say, what in the world are they talking about? What is this prophet talking about? It is a privilege to be able to see what these verses say and what they mean. Isaiah has told Israel that from time to time God will be bringing discipline to his people. That discipline is never to be interpreted that God is done with us and that God does not like us. And that's a very immature viewpoint. Just as our immature child reacts to being grounded from his parents for misbehaving, spiritual maturity will reveal that God is working in your lives by disciplining you because of his unending love for you. God will bring you into these situations. God will walk you through these situations. God will deliver you from those situations, and he will guard your back. And after you have been delivered from your situations, you will be a better follower of the Lord, a better disciple of Jesus Christ. God is way too kind to be cruel. God is too wise to be mistaken. God is too deep to even fully explain himself to you. So continue to follow the Lord, and you will have revelation in the words of God. Amen. I hope this has been helpful and informative. Our next study on the next video will include Isaiah chapter 53, one of the most important chapters in the Bible, and also we'll cover chapter 54. I hope this has been helpful and informative. Thank you for viewing, and good day.